A quiet town in California was shaken to its core when a young mother suddenly vanished, leaving behind her children, her home, and a trail of questions darker than the forest that swallowed her. At first, neighbors whispered about an accident, but soon evidence surfaced that suggested something far more chilling. What began as a simple missing person case would turn into a twisted tale of betrayal, secrecy, and a revelation that no one saw coming. It was a warm August morning when neighbors last saw Elena Morales, a devoted mother of two, walking toward her car. She carried a small purse, wearing casual clothes, nothing unusual. Yet something in her hurried steps and the nervous glance over her shoulder suggested unease. Hours later, when her children were picked up early from school by an unexpected relative, questions began to stir. Why had Elena not been the one to get them? Calls to her phone went unanswered. By nightfall, her house was dark, her car gone, and Elena was nowhere to be found. What seemed at first like a misunderstanding quickly escalated into a sinister disappearance. The town would soon discover that the shadows of the Angeles forest conceal more than silence. They hide secrets no one is prepared to face. By the following morning, Elena's disappearance had become the talk of the neighborhood. Friends called hospitals, hoping she had been in an accident. Others feared she might have simply decided to leave everything behind. But those who knew her best insisted Elena would never abandon her children. Police arrived at her home and quickly noted something disturbing. The house looked lived in, but strangely staged. A half-eaten breakfast sat on the table, but her phone and wallet were missing. Drawers were left slightly open, as if someone had searched through them in a hurry. Even more unsettling, her car was later discovered parked several blocks away, neatly locked with no signs of struggle. The unease grew heavier with every unanswered question. Something had forced Elena out of her routine, and the shadows of the Angeles forest loomed larger in everyone's imagination. Detectives began piecing together the last 24 hours of Elena's life. Security cameras from nearby homes captured fragments of her movements, her car driving down the street, a shadowed figure walking beside her, and then nothing. The footage ended abruptly, as if the story had been cut short mid-sentence. Witnesses recalled hearing muffled arguments from Elena's house days earlier, but no one could say for sure what they had overheard. Meanwhile, her children, now in the care of a relative, described their mother as worried in the days before she vanished. She had whispered on the phone at night, quickly hanging up whenever they entered the room. Police uncovered that Elena had been researching trails in the Angeles National Forest, a place she loved but rarely visited alone. Was she planning an escape, or had someone led her into the woods knowing she would never return? As investigators pushed further, the Angeles National Forest became the central focus of the search. Teams of volunteers and officers combed through rugged trails, their flashlights piercing the dense foliage at night. What they found was haunting. A scarf recognized as Elena's, snagged on a low branch, fluttering like a silent cry for help. Not far away, search dogs picked up her scent, but it abruptly ended at a clearing where the soil appeared freshly disturbed. Despite digging, nothing was uncovered, leaving only eerie silence. Rumors spread quickly. Some whispered she had fallen prey to wild animals. Others believed she had been buried in the woods. But detectives noticed something far more chilling. Nearby cameras recorded Elena's husband's truck entering the area just hours after her last known sighting. Suddenly, the case shifted from a search for a missing woman to the possibility of a far darker truth. Detectives questioned Elena's husband, Marcos, who appeared calm but oddly rehearsed. He insisted he had last seen his wife early that morning, claiming she had errands to run. Yet when asked about his truck's presence near the forest, he grew defensive, brushing it off as a quick drive to clear his head. Investigators weren't convinced. Neighbors recalled hearing heated arguments between the couple just days earlier, and one even reported seeing Marcos carrying a large, tarp-covered object into the back of his truck late at night. When pressed, Marcos claimed it was old furniture he planned to throw away, but the timing and secrecy raised alarm. Behind closed doors, detectives began considering the possibility that Elena hadn't simply gone missing, she had been silenced, and the man closest to her might be the one holding the key to her fate. The search widened, and every step seemed to point back toward Marcos. Investigators obtained a warrant to examine his truck. Inside, they found faint traces of mud from the Angeles forest, though Marcos claimed he had been hiking alone. More disturbing were small streaks of what looked like dried blood beneath a floor mat. Preliminary testing suggested it matched Elena's blood type. Still, without a body, the case was shaky. Marcos maintained his innocence, even growing emotional in front of cameras, pleading for his wife's safe return. But the tears seemed hollow, his voice rehearsed. Detectives quietly built their case, mapping his movements, reconstructing timelines, and comparing every detail. Each inconsistency tightened the noose of suspicion. Yet until the truth was unearthed in the forest itself, the mystery remained suspended between hope and horror. As search teams returned to the Angeles forest, they focused on the clearing where Elena's scent had disappeared. Fresh drone scans revealed faint drag marks in the soil, leading deeper into the woods. Following the trail, officers discovered fragments of fabric, consistent with the clothes Elena had been wearing the morning she vanished. Nearby, a shovel lay abandoned, its handle streaked with the same reddish-brown stains found in Marcos's truck. Yet no body was uncovered. The forest seemed to mock the investigators, swallowing every clue into its endless green silence. The community grew restless, torn between hope and dread. Whispers filled the air. If Elena wasn't alive, then where was she? And if she was gone, had Marcos buried her in the shadows of the wilderness, confident no one would ever find her? Investigators doubled their efforts, determined not to let the forest keep its secret. They brought in cadaver dogs, trained to detect the faintest trace of human remains. The animals grew restless near a ravine just off the main trail, barking and scratching at the dirt. Excavation began carefully, each shovelful of soil stirring tension among the officers. What emerged was unsettling. A large sheet of plastic, tightly wrapped, partially hidden beneath layers of pine needles and earth. The package was heavy, but when carefully lifted, it revealed nothing inside but torn clothing soaked with dark stains. It was as if someone had started to conceal a body, but had moved it before the search closed in. The discovery both confirmed their worst fears and deepened the mystery. If Elena had been here, where was she now? And who had taken such elaborate steps to erase her? The discovery of the blood-stained clothing and the empty plastic wrapping shifted the investigation into darker territory. Detectives realized they weren't chasing a disappearance anymore. They were unraveling a carefully staged crime. Marcos's alibi crumbled further when surveillance footage surfaced from a nearby gas station. His truck, late at night, carrying something bulky under a tarp. The timestamp matched the hours after Elena was last seen. Forensic experts confirmed the clothing found in the forest bore her DNA, leaving little doubt she had suffered violence. But without a body, the case still hung in limbo. Detectives pressed Marcos harder, but he deflected with cold precision, repeating the same hollow lines about wanting his wife home. To the public, he played the grieving husband. Behind closed doors, he was now the prime suspect in what was looking more like a cover-up than a disappearance. The investigation reached its most critical moment when detectives obtained a warrant to review security footage from a storage facility near Marcos's workplace. On the tapes, grainy but undeniable, they saw him late at night, struggling to maneuver a large, awkwardly shaped bundle from his truck into a rented unit. He stayed inside for nearly 30 minutes before emerging empty-handed, drenched in sweat, glancing nervously around. When investigators raided the unit days later, they found it meticulously cleaned, the concrete floor scrubbed with industrial chemicals. Yet under UV lights, faint streaks of blood glowed across the surface. Blood later confirmed to be Elena's. The illusion of her being merely missing collapsed instantly. Detectives knew they weren't looking for Elena alive anymore. They were pursuing justice for a woman whose final hours had been stolen, hidden behind lies and the walls of a man she once trusted. With the storage unit evidence secured, the tide of the investigation turned sharply. Detectives now had not only circumstantial proof, but also physical traces linking Marcos to Elena's fate. The silence that once shielded him began to fracture. Friends of the couple stepped forward, revealing that Elena had confided in them about wanting to leave the marriage. She feared her husband's temper, describing how he monitored her every move. Police theorized that her plan to escape had been discovered, and Marcos acted to ensure she never got the chance. The press swarmed around the story, painting it as a chilling portrait of control and betrayal. For the first time, Marcos appeared shaken in public, his once calm facade cracking. Under the weight of suspicion, the case was no longer about a missing woman, it was about exposing the chilling truth behind her disappearance. Detectives pressed further, focusing on Marcos's movements after Elena's disappearance. Cell tower records placed his phone near multiple secluded locations within the Angeles forest in the days following her last sighting. It was as though he had returned again and again, checking the woods like a man guarding a secret. To strengthen their case, forensic experts compared soil samples from his truck to the earth at the suspected burial site, an exact match. The evidence grew undeniable, each thread weaving into a noose around him. Meanwhile, Elena's family clung to hope of recovering her body, desperate for closure. The police knew time was their enemy. Every passing day risked nature erasing vital traces. What had begun as a story of a woman who vanished was now a hunt for her remains, and for the truth her husband had buried under layers of lies. The breakthrough came when investigators discovered a crucial piece of footage hidden among hours of neighborhood surveillance. A nearby business had captured Marcos returning home in the early morning, his truck lighter, the tarp gone. But what drew detectives' attention was his clothing, smeared with dirt and what appeared to be dark stains. Forensic experts later confirmed traces of Elena's DNA on the discarded clothes found in his garage trash bin. The net was closing. Still, without Elena's body, prosecutors worried about building an airtight case. The pressure mounted as the public demanded justice. Candlelight vigils were held, her face illuminated on posters, her name whispered with grief. The forest seemed to breathe with secrets. But now it was only a matter of time before it gave Elena back, or before Marcos's lies collapsed entirely under the weight of undeniable truth. Detectives, determined to recover Elena's body, intensified their search in the Angeles forest. Using advanced ground-penetrating radar, they scanned areas where Marcos's phone had pinged late at night. The technology revealed unusual soil disturbances in a remote section of the ravine, far from common trails. As officers began to dig, the forest seemed to fall into an eerie hush. Hours passed before they uncovered what they had feared, a large, weather-worn bundle buried beneath layers of earth and stone. Wrapped in heavy fabric, inside lay human remains, later confirmed through dental records. To be Elena's, the discovery shattered any illusion of hope and ignited outrage. Forensic teams carefully documented every detail, from the position of the body to the materials used to conceal it. Now, the case transformed, no longer a disappearance, but a confirmed homicide with Marcos at its dark center. The confirmation that Elena's body had been found broke the case wide open. Forensic experts meticulously examined the remains, uncovering chilling details, blunt force trauma to the skull and bruising consistent with restraints. The evidence painted a story of violence, not accident. Marcos was immediately taken into custody, his calm demeanor finally shattered. In the interrogation room, his mask slipped, sweat poured, his voice cracked, and though he denied the killing, his explanations collapsed under the weight of the evidence. Detectives presented him with the trail of proof: the tarp, the truck, the blood, the storage unit, and now Elena's body. Each piece was a nail in the coffin of his lies. Outside, the community mourned, but also burned with anger. The man who had vowed to love and protect Elena was now revealed as the architect of her fate. The courtroom became the next stage of the story, and the atmosphere was electric. Reporters crowded every bench. Sketch artists scrambled to capture Marcos's hollow face, and Elena's family sat silently, their grief etched into their eyes. Prosecutors laid out the narrative piece by piece: the marital tension, the secret, monitoring, the late-night tarp, the stage storage unit, and the tragic discovery in the forest. Jurors listened in stunned silence as forensic experts explained the injuries and matched DNA evidence to the blood in Marcos's truck. Defense attorneys tried to argue that the case was circumstantial, that perhaps Elena's death had been accidental, but their words rang empty. The jury saw the pattern. A man desperate to maintain control, whose lies crumbled under science and surveillance. Each revelation cut deeper, and the trial became not just about guilt, but about exposing the devastating betrayal of trust. As the trial unfolded, the weight of evidence pressed heavily on the jury. Witnesses took the stand, each testimony carving deeper into Marcos's defense. A neighbor recounted hearing Elena cry out during late-night arguments. A co-worker testified about Marcos's obsession with controlling her whereabouts. And forensic experts meticulously explained how every trace, from the soil on his tires to the chemical scrub marks in the storage unit, linked back to him. The prosecution painted Marcos not as a grieving husband, but as a man who believed he could outsmart everyone and bury the truth with his wife. The defense grew increasingly desperate, suggesting implausible theories of Elena running into the forest alone or meeting with strangers. But with her body recovered and the forensic trail undeniable, these arguments only highlighted their weakness. The jury watched Marcos closely, noting every nervous twitch, every forced tear, as the walls closed in around him. When Marcos finally took the stand, the atmosphere in the courtroom thickened with tension. His defense attorneys had warned him not to testify, but his pride pushed him forward. At first, he tried to maintain the image of a heartbroken husband, his voice trembling as he described Elena as the love of his life. But under cross-examination, the facade unraveled. Prosecutors confronted him with the footage of his truck, the shovel, the tarp, and the blood-soaked storage unit. Each denial he offered was countered with irrefutable evidence. His answers became tangled, contradictory, and the jury could see the panic creeping into his eyes. When asked why he repeatedly visited the burial site in the forest, he stammered, offering no explanation. The courtroom fell silent, the illusion shattered. For the first time, Marcos looked less like a grieving spouse, and more like a man cornered by his own lies. The jury listened in complete silence as Marcos's testimony crumbled under the weight of contradiction. Every attempt to twist the narrative back in his favor only deepened the impression of guilt. When prosecutors replayed the footage of him hauling the tarp into the storage unit, his face went pale, his hands trembling slightly as he tried to look away. The moment was devastating. his final mask slipping before 12 ordinary citizens tasked with deciding his fate. Elena's family watched, tears streaming, knowing the truth had finally pierced through the lies. Outside, the media captured every detail, headlines screaming about the husband-turned-predator. By the end of the day, the defense had no convincing story left to tell. The image of Marcos as a victim had collapsed entirely, leaving only the shadow of a man who had traded love for violence and control. The courtroom was hushed as the jury filed back into their seats, the weight of weeks of testimony etched across their faces. When the foreman stood and delivered the word guilty, the silence shattered into gasps, sobs, and whispered prayers. Elena's family clutched one another, finally given the justice they had begged for, even if it could never heal the loss. Marcos sat motionless, his once defiant gaze now hollow, as if the gravity of his downfall had finally crushed him. The judge's gavel echoed like a final reckoning, sealing his fate with a life sentence. Outside, candles burned in Elena's memory, her name carried through the crowd as both a cry of mourning and a warning. This case, once cloaked in mystery, had revealed the darkness that can grow behind closed doors, and how truth, though buried, can never remain hidden forever.